As we are coming on the air tonight, the Israeli military storming Gaza's main hospital again, going building to building inside the hospital that has hundreds of patients stuck inside. What we're hearing now from President Biden about it and how a near total comms blackout in Gaza could be making things even more complicated. Plus, breaking just before we came on the air, a woman in Texas found guilty of murdering a pro-cyclist who was her so-called love rival. How prosecutors managed to win this case on mostly circumstantial evidence. Also just into it, Sean Combs, who you may know as Diddy, accused of rape and years of abuse by a former girlfriend, a singer who was once on his record label. What she's saying tonight and what his reps are telling NBC News. And a red cup rebellion today. Thousands of Starbucks workers walking off the job on one of the biggest days of the year for the company. We'll take you live to one Starbucks for the latest twist in this years-long labor fight. Plus, why some folks in one state want to split off and join another out west, and the reality check on the chances of secession success. That's in our new special series, Divided States of America, a little bit later on in the show. Hey there, I'm Hallie, and tonight Israeli forces are storming Gaza's main hospital now for the second time in just 24 hours, according to Israeli officials. IDF soldiers searching building to building at Al-Shifa hospital. This is the place that's now at the center of this war, as we are seeing more calls now to get the hundreds of patients trapped inside out safely. Patients, including dozens of premature babies. Israel says this woman, Yehuda Weiss, a hostage held captive by Hamas, was found dead at a location close to the hospital in the last couple of hours. She was 65 years old. The Israelis are now calling Al-Shifa a terrorist cell. Remember, Israel says it has intelligence showing that Hamas is operating inside the building, inside the hospital, with President Biden in just the last 24 hours accusing Hamas of a war crime by having headquarters under the hospital. Hamas and doctors inside deny this. Israeli soldiers say they're finding AK-47s and hand grenades, military uniforms, a laptop with a photo of a kidnapped Israeli soldier on it, all inside Al-Shifa. We should note here, it is hard to know or to independently verify what exactly is happening inside the hospital right now because the trickles of information we've been getting are starting to dry up. NBC News tried to call the doctors inside that our teams have been talking to for days. Many of those calls not answered today, making this whole thing even more complicated. Another near-complete phone and internet blackout in this area, according to Gaza's biggest provider. All of it as the White House late today says it's probably impossible for Israel to completely eliminate Hamas after the terror attack on October 7th in Israel. I want to bring in Keir Simmons, who's on the ground for us live in Tel Aviv. And Keir, there are a lot of moving pieces tonight. Let's start with this woman, this hostage, that Israeli military reportedly found dead not far from Al-Shifa. What do we know about her and about the situation?
Yeah, I mean, it's an important development, of course. You heard advice, 65 years old, a woman who'd been suffering from cancer, whose husband was killed on October 7th, and then her body found, and we're told by the Israelis, in a structure next door to the Al-Shifa hospital, so close by. They appear to have known about this for a while and have been conducting, making sure that it is her, conducting work to make sure that her identity is right. Let me just read you a little bit, Hallie, from what they say about her. The body of Yehuda Weiss was abducted by the Hamas terrorist organization, was extracted by IDF troops from a structure adjacent to the Shifa hospital in the Gaza Strip, and was transferred to Israeli territory. In the structure in which Yehuda was located, military equipment, including Kalashnikov rifles and RPGs, were also found. And of course, this comes after those AK-47s were found and filmed around various locations in another part of the Al-Shifa hospital. So as well as, of course, being terrible news for Yehuda Weiss's family, it's also more evidence, if you like, suggesting the Israelis say that Hamas were in that hospital or in that vicinity.
This hospital, as we mentioned, Keir, is in such a spotlight right now, considering this war between Israel and Hamas. It feels in many ways like the epicenter of, if not the fighting, at least the focus of why the fighting and where the fighting is happening here. What else do we know about where this goes? And importantly, what we know and don't know about the reality on the ground here. As we've noted, it is getting harder to talk to some of the people that our teams have been talking to at that hospital, that I know you've been talking to at that hospital. Tell us more.
Yeah. Well, there's been a blackout now, effectively, and that's partly because we've been talking so long, Hallie, about Gaza running out of fuel, and now the telecom companies that clearly need fuel for power they don't have power, so things are just getting more and more difficult, as well as the challenge, for example, for simple, fresh running water. And all of these things go to the essential question of whether what is happening in Gaza, if you like, is proportionate in terms of Israel's right to respond to what happened on October 7th. There have been important votes at the United Nations, and we spoke, Hallie, to the French ambassador to the United Nations. Take a listen to what he said.
We need to draw a very clear line between what is allowed, which is, eradicating terrorism, which probably has to be done, and especially when you see the situation in Israel, the attack that took place 5 weeks ago, and protecting the civilians who have nothing to do with that.
So the French have been leading in terms of calls for humanitarian help, and also have been a voice speaking out about what's going on. And at the same time, of course, Israel determined. Benjamin Netanyahu, Hallie, talking about that they will find Hamas wherever they are in Gaza. And President Biden, who had just spoken to the Israeli Prime Minister, saying he's not sure when this all ends. Hallie.
Keir Simmons live for us there in Tel Aviv. Keir, thank you. Let's bring you back here to the United States now, because in just the last couple of hours, we've seen a jury in Texas find a pro-cyclist guilty of murdering an alleged romantic rival in a jealous rage. This is a story we've told you about here on this show. You see the back of Kaitlin Armstrong's head here. She's standing up as the judge is reading the verdict, with the victim's family apparently getting emotional as that happened. You'll remember Moriah Wilson had been riding her mountain bike over to a friend's apartment back in May of last year when Armstrong shot her 3 times. That happened just hours after Wilson went swimming and had dinner with Armstrong's boyfriend, Colin Strickland. He's also a cyclist. Strickland and Wilson had dated for a little while before his relationship with Armstrong. After the murder, investigators say Armstrong went to Costa Rica, got plastic surgery, changed her hair. Morgan Chesky is joining us now. And Morgan, this is a story that made headlines nationally almost the second that word got out about what happened here, because of some of the circumstances of this. Walk us through here what happened in the trial that led the jury to this decision and the reaction that you're hearing tonight.
Yeah, Hallie, really a stunning verdict. Less than 2 hours of deliberation. Then the jury comes out and they find Armstrong guilty of the murder of Moriah Wilson. And these 3 individuals, Armstrong, Wilson, and Colin Strickland, all intertwined in relationships at various points in time. We know that Strickland dated Kaitlin Armstrong before and after a brief relationship that he acknowledged with Moriah Wilson that took place in fall of 2021. And the state made it their mission to point out the mountain of circumstantial evidence that implicated Armstrong here in this crime, painting her to be a very jealous girlfriend, one that spied on Wilson's or Colin Strickland's electronic devices, iPads, phones, trying to track his whereabouts. And it was some of that circumstantial evidence, Hallie, that really put her at the scene. Both DNA on Wilson's bike that belonged to Armstrong, her GPS in her Jeep going around and around that scene about an hour before Wilson's body was found, in addition to the fact that she had been monitoring her workout activity on the Strava fitness app. And those are just a few of the examples. And some of what we heard today also included that Armstrong had friends who independently called police and said that they had heard her mention on 2 separate accounts threats of potentially killing Moriah Wilson. All of that despite the defense's best efforts to poke holes in some of that DNA or GPS science. It wasn't enough when the jury went ahead and found her guilty of murder here, Hallie.
Morgan Chesky live for us there in Austin. Morgan, thank you very much. Some other developing news tonight. We're hearing for the first time now from the former House Speaker since the man accused of attacking her husband with a hammer was found guilty by a jury in San Francisco late today. We're talking about David DePape, now convicted on 2 counts, including attempted kidnapping of a federal official after going after Paul Pelosi at his home in October of last year. DePape now faces a possible life sentence. Dana Griffin is joining us now. And Dana, DePape and his defense team never denied that he's the one who attacked Paul Pelosi. So what did the jury find in this verdict? And then what are we hearing from former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi on this?
Yeah, Hallie, so the jury found David DePape guilty of both federal charges, attempted kidnapping of a federal official, that's Nancy Pelosi, and assault on a federal official's family member, that's Paul Pelosi. This case really boiled down to, did David DePape go to that home and target the Pelosi family because of her position in Congress? The jury said yes by delivering this guilty verdict. The defense tried to argue that he went there to talk to her and that he wanted to lure someone else in. But that's not what the jury found in this case. We have heard from the Pelosi family. They sent a statement. It reads in part, the Pelosi family is very proud of their pop, who demonstrated extraordinary composure and courage on the night of the attack a year ago and in the courtroom this week. Thankfully, Mr. Pelosi continues to make progress in his recovery. We also heard from the U.S. attorney in the Northern District of California moments after that verdict came down. Listen to what he had to say.
In America, one's free to believe whatever they want and to engage in impassioned political debate. What this guilty verdict on all counts sends is a clear message that regardless of what your beliefs are, what you cannot do is physically attack a member of Congress or their immediate family for their performance in their job.
And Hallie, that's been a major talking point over the last several years, just the political discourse in this country. And I think the jury made a bold statement by saying that you cannot attack someone based upon their job and get away with it. Hallie?
Dana, he still faces state charges. So what does this verdict mean for that?
Well, it means a lot of things. He may, or his defense may, try to figure out how they're going to now proceed during the state charges, which he's facing attempted murder in that case and could face up to life in prison. Maybe they take a deal, or maybe they rework the way they presented him in this case. He actually took the stand in his own defense, and that was something that was kind of shocking, but it definitely showed us a little bit more about his thinking and his conspiracy theories. And so whether he takes the stand in that state trial, we'll see. He will be sentenced, though, for the federal charges in December. Hallie?
Dana Griffin live for us there in San Francisco. Dana, thank you. Also out west, President Biden, in just about maybe an hour or so from now, set to focus a lot of his attention on economic issues overseas and what that means for this country. Remember, he's at that big summit now in the Bay Area where Dana just was, obviously. But the real focus of much of the White House, for today at least, behind the scenes, is this moment when he called Chinese President Xi Jinping a dictator. That came just hours, literally just hours after that huge meeting to try to get both the U.S. and China back on speaking terms. At the minimum, a meeting that President Biden called really productive. I want you to see the Secretary of State's reaction in this moment, because what Tony Blinken did here kind of tells you a lot about how this moment's being received. Let me play it.
And Mr. President, after today, would you still refer to President Xi as a dictator? This is a term that we used earlier this year.
Well, look, he is. I mean, he's a dictator in the sense that he is a guy who runs a country that is a communist country that is based on a form of government totally different than ours.
You saw the Secretary of State kind of turn his head away a little bit there. Listen, we're not body language readers, but that happened in plain view of the TV cameras. I want to bring in Monica Alva now to talk through some of the fallout and some of the cleanup, Monica, at this point. We do think that we could hear more, obviously, from the administration throughout the evening here. You had this carefully planned meeting here. The focus was supposed to be on, getting them back on talking terms, essentially, if not amazing terms, at least communicative terms. And then after all of that, you had the president saying this. Are administration officials that you're talking to today seeing this as a step back in progress? What is their thinking here moving forward?
Well, Hallie, there's a little bit of deja vu here, and that is the really important context to add to this conversation. And that's because President Biden very plainly called President Xi a dictator earlier this summer, but that was off camera during some fundraiser remarks that was meant for a smaller audience, not in front of really the entire press corps, his cabinet, and really the whole world as he did yesterday. But what senior administration officials that I've talked to all day today keep pointing out is, look, the president was was asked by a reporter, does he still consider him to be a dictator? And the president was frank and said, yeah, sure, he is, because he's the leader of a communist country that operates completely differently than a country like the United States does. So that in that respect, it wasn't something that he came out and proactively said, but we know this is a belief that he holds because he said it essentially at that fundraiser again a couple of months ago. And they didn't walk those comments back at the time either. Of course, yes, that body language, that involuntary reaction tells you a lot about probably some of those in the room who wish the president had just wrapped up that press conference and left without doing that. But I'm told it hasn't really derailed any of what they feel the progress that was made yesterday has been so far here. Hallie.
There was another surprise, Monica, that has come up now in the sort of aftermath of these key China meetings. And if it's a surprise, it's kind of a good surprise, and that is this idea of panda diplomacy, because Xi Jinping, in this dinner with top executives, hinted at sending more to the U.S. as a gesture of goodwill. I think I don't have to tell my people here in Washington, we lost the pandas at the National Zoo just recently. Sounds like they may be coming back to San Diego, and this, as you're reporting today, Monica, talking to your sources, seemed to catch administration officials off guard. So give us the, real deal here. Are the pandas coming back to the United States?
So I was asking for weeks, Hallie, is this going to be a part of the summit with President Xi? Is this on the agenda? Is this on the list? And everybody was like, well, don't worry, we have to deal with 19 other things, but okay, maybe the pandas will be a part of the conversation. And then after yesterday, they said to me, nope, the pandas didn't come up at all. We had a lot of other issues and very thorny and intractable topics to get through. The pandas were not a discussion. So then we thought, okay, it's not happening. Then President Xi came out at this dinner, announced that, and it really was to the White House's surprise. There was no pre-planned heads up. Then I called the San Diego Zoo today because that's the one that was name-checked by President Xi as a potential future home for these pandas. And they said they had no idea that was coming either, but that they very much welcomed the surprise and they hope the pandas go there. And that is investigative journalism for you, Hallie, as I know you know so well and appreciate.
Scoops Alba coming to us live from the West Coast. Mon, thank you very much. Appreciate you. So listen, they're calling it the Red Cup Rebellion. Thousands of Starbucks workers walking off the job today. Part of this long battle with the company over unionization. It's the one-day strike, so it's just today. And it's meant to protest what workers say is too much demand, especially on days where Starbucks gives out discounts, free stuff. Like
just
today.
have basically an infinite amount of drinks, and we're understaffed, and we're underpaid, and we're sick of it.
That worker's talking about Red Cup Day, this annual thing where customers can get a reusable red cup if they order a holiday drink. And you just heard why that's a problem. It means a crush of people on top of the usual rush from mobile orders, the drive-through stuff, the in-store orders. Starbucks has seen a kind of labor wave in the last couple years. More than 360 stores in almost every state in this country voting to create unions since late 2021. Our Noah Pransky is posted up in New York, of course, outside of Starbucks. Tell me what you've been hearing from workers about what they want to get out of this strike today.
I think workers are looking for a change in culture. It's not so much about red cups as it is about worker treatment. And that's not just in New York City, that's nationally. Take a look at today's walkout by the numbers, the largest we've seen from Starbucks workers in 2 years of organization here. 5,000 workers across the country in 200 different locations walking off the job. Now, that's just a fraction of Starbucks stores, but obviously a major impact. Some of those stores, it seems, were not able to open today. A lot of them did. But protesters were telling us that they were burnt out, they feel fatigued, and a whole host of other complaints about the Starbucks Corporation. Have a listen.
We've been trying to negotiate with Starbucks, but they will do anything to, not meet with us, so they'll stall.
Start bargaining with us, listen to what we have to say, at least come to any kind of, cooperative place for us to build up a contract.
So, Hallie, Starbucks, obviously one of the many union groups protesting, walking off the job in some cases this year, but they're hoping to have the same kind of success that we've seen with other union groups who have led to either strikes or very close to it, as we saw in the case of UPS, for instance.
Well, you talk about sort of the broad issue of unionization, labor movements in this country more broadly, something we've covered a ton here on this show. Starbucks workers have filed more than 70 complaints just where you are in New York City for labor law violations, including 14 just today. Help us understand those and some of those allegations and how Starbucks is responding.
So the macro picture here is that the complaint is refusal to bargain with these new unions that have cropped up all over the country. But at the micro level here in New York City has a law to protect baristas and fast food workers. It's called the Fair Work Week Law, and they're alleging that Starbucks is violating it. It guarantees workers that they have regular schedules, that they get advance notice if their schedules change, extra pay if there's change. But workers also point to the bottom line, and they say on days like today where there are discounts and huge promotions, the company is profiting, the worker is not, and they point to the bottom line, $36 billion in revenue for Starbucks this past fiscal year, up 12% from the previous one. They say it's not fair. They want a bigger share of those profits. Hallie?
Noah Pransky live for us in New York. Thanks. Here in Washington, turns out a controversial Republican lawmaker is going to leave Congress. He's out. Only question is when, after an ethics report is accusing him of spending thousands of dollars on Botox and OnlyFans and a Vegas honeymoon. It's why George Santos is announcing today he's not going to run for re-election. So he's definitely not going to be a part of the next Congress. Fine. Thing is, are his colleagues going to kick him out even sooner? We are seeing a ton of reaction tonight to that brand new ethics report, which unanimously finds substantial evidence that Santos committed fraud. They say he spent tens of thousands of dollars on campaign money on stuff that did not have to do with his campaign at all. Okay. Like what, you may ask? Like $6,000 worth of stuff at Ferragamo stores, $2,000 at resorts in Atlantic City, $1,400 at a skin spa in New York, $4,000 at Hermes. Julie Sirkin is joining us now. This was like a whoa moment, I think, for some people on the Hill who had been anticipating this ethics report coming out, had been wondering what this report would say. Talk me through what you're hearing from lawmakers now, because the question really does seem to be, is George Santos even going to make it to the end of this congressional term, or is he going to get expelled before that?
That's really the big question, and already we're hearing from lawmakers who didn't want to vote to expel him 2 weeks ago. They were waiting for the findings of this report. But now looking at this, I mean, you laid out some of the allegations in here. The committee essentially has said that Santos has sought to fraudulently exploit every aspect of his House candidacy. It all but recommends that Santos is expelled from Congress. One of the reasons the chair of the Ethics Committee said they didn't put it in that report is because that would have dragged out the process for months before this report could be released. But that doesn't mean they're not going to vote to kick him out. We already heard from some of those who voted against that happening 2 weeks ago, now saying because of this evidence, they really don't have any other choice. Obviously, that shift from Santos, I can't emphasize enough how notable it is. Even when he was indicted on those federal charges, he said he's still going to run for re-election again. Now this seems to be the straw that broke the camel's back, Hallie.
Who are his friends? And by that, I mean, who are his congressional defenders, Julia? At this point, what allies does he have left?
None. I mean, there's really nobody that is standing up for Santos at this point. I mean, he's tried to make some allies, even in Speaker Johnson a couple of weeks ago, saying that he deserves due process. I got to tell you, though, we have a new statement from his spokesperson where he said, in part, that these findings are very damning. He said that the speaker has reviewed the report and it's troubling findings. He said that Johnson encourages all involved to consider the best interests of the institution as this matter is addressed further. And already there are multiple resolutions to expel Santos. It isn't just one or two. There are competing resolutions to effectively do the same thing. A reminder, though, that's a 2/3 of the House threshold. It seems likely that he could get there. And again, it's only a matter of question of when, not if.
Julie Sirkin live for us there on the Hill. Busy day for you, Jules. Thank you. Busy day generally in the news world, too, because coming up, we've got more breaking news tonight. We are just learning a judge has declared a mistrial in the trial of an ex-officer involved in that deadly Breonna Taylor raid. We're going to explain why in just a minute. Plus, the FDA expanding that eye drop recall to more than 24 products. What experts say you got to watch out for. And a new move from Bud Light, how the company's trying to shake off that sales slump after the backlash and boycott against it. Some breaking news just into us now. One of the most famous men in hip-hop now getting sued by his former girlfriend, who's also a singer, accusing him of rape and years of sexual abuse. Sean Combs, also known as Diddy, you know his face, I'm sure, allegedly controlled Cassie, a singer whose real name is Cassandra Ventura, for years, according to this lawsuit. The suit says he plied her with drugs. At points, he beat her, and that he forced her to have sex with male prostitutes on camera. Ventura saying in a statement today, I'm quoting here, "After years in silence and darkness, I am finally ready to tell my story and to speak up on behalf of myself and for the benefit of other women who face violence and abuse in their relationships." Combs's lawyer is telling our team he vehemently denies the allegations, calling them offensive and outrageous. I want to bring in legal analyst Danny Cevallos. And Danny, this lawsuit is just making a lot of news here, right? I mean, this dropped just within the last hour or so. Walk us through what it says and what could come next.
The allegations are pretty terrible. I mean, they're worth reading and not getting into in too much detail here. They wouldn't be right for TV. But essentially, this is a civil lawsuit. The allegations sound as if they are criminal allegations, but this is only a civil lawsuit. And interestingly enough, the plaintiff's attorneys are saying that apparently, allegedly, the defense here Combs offered money, a lot of money, to resolve this prior to filing a lawsuit. Well, that may be interesting, but it's not going to be admissible evidence because these offers to compromise normally don't come in as evidence against the defendant. But all in all, these allegations are pretty horrific.
From a defense perspective, we've already heard now, and again, I realize this is not a criminal case, obviously, but with what we've heard from the reps for Diddy, for Sean Combs here, how do you anticipate this moves forward?
So I have a few cases under the Child Victims Act in New York, which is a similar one-year window to bring up allegations that may be otherwise barred by the statute of limitations. And normally the challenge is for older cases finding witnesses. But I have to imagine with all of the people, the assistants, the infrastructure surrounding Diddy, that there have to be witnesses that will either say yay or nay, one way or another, either support P. Diddy or support the plaintiff in this case, because these are people that were just surrounded at all times by so many other people. I have to imagine there are going to be witnesses that are going to have a story to tell.
Danny Cevallos, thank you very much. We've also got some other news just breaking in the last couple of minutes here. A federal judge declaring a mistrial in the latest attempt to try to hold Louisville officers accountable for the death of Breonna Taylor. We're talking about Brett Hankison. He's a former officer who fired shots into Taylor's home during a botched raid back in 2020. He was facing federal civil rights charges of excessive force, but the judge has now declared this mistrial after the jury deadlocked, apparently, on these charges. NBC's Shaquille Brewster is following this one for us here. So, Shaq, explain what happened here and what this means for the case going forward for the folks who wanted to see Hankison held responsible for what he did that night.
Well, Hallie, to answer that second part of the question, this means that we could see an entirely new trial to come. The judge setting a hearing for about a month from now to determine the exact next steps in this trial. But let's step back. This is the federal case against one of the officers involved in that March 2020 raid, as you mentioned, against Breonna Taylor. You know kind of the fact pattern there, where her boyfriend said they feared a break-in. They heard a noise at the door in the overnight hours in March of 2020 when police busted in. Her boyfriend fired one shot, hitting an officer. Now, Hankinson, while he didn't shoot Breonna Taylor, prosecutors allege that he essentially acted recklessly, that he used excessive force because he then went to a window and a sliding glass door that were covered, they say, by blinds and a curtain, and then fired 10 shots into not only Breonna Taylor's apartment, but also the apartment of her neighbors that included a young family. Hankinson was on trial for the similar action in state charges just earlier this year. Earlier last year, he was acquitted in that case, and now a jury deadlocked on whether or not he violated both the civil rights of Breonna Taylor and her boyfriend, but also the family in that neighboring apartment, Hallie.
Shaq Brewster, thank you very much for that update. Again, coming into us in just the last couple of minutes here. Appreciate it, Shaq. More exclusive details now from NBC News tonight in the disturbing case of a man run over by police and then buried without his family knowing about it. The lawyer for the family of Dexter Wade, who was hit by a Jackson, Mississippi police car back in March, says an independent autopsy found Wade had an ID on him at the time of the crash, an ID with his address on it. Why is that such a big deal? Because police didn't tell Wade's family for months that they'd hit him. Instead, they buried him in an unmarked grave in a pauper's field marked with just a number. Well, Dexter's mother spent an agonizing 172 days looking for him. We have been covering the story every step of the way, led by the reporter who broke it here, our John Shupe, who reports that minutes after leaving his home back in March, Dexter Wade was hit by a Jackson police cruiser as he tried to cross a nearby highway on foot. After Wade's mom was finally told of his death and where he was buried, the family requested that Dexter be exhumed, only to find this, more disappointment now. By the time the family arrived at his unmarked grave on Monday, a public works crew had already removed the body with no other witnesses present. NBC's Priscilla Thompson is following this story for us. Just extraordinarily difficult detail after extraordinarily difficult detail here for this family, as we're getting some new details from this autopsy and the alleged failures that led to so much uncertainty for his family for so long. Priscilla, bring us up to speed here.
Yeah, Hallie, just an incredibly gut-wrenching situation. And of course, this new revelation just adding to the pain. The idea that this independent autopsy found that he had a wallet with a state identification card that included the address that he shared with his mother on it. That was what the pathologist found in his front pocket, along with a credit card and a health insurance card. And we're also learning more about some of the injuries that he may have suffered from that independent autopsy, including the pathologist saying that his body was never embalmed, and so he was in an advanced state of decomposition by the time that body was exhumed. And also the report found multiple blunt force injuries to the skull, ribs, and pelvis, and that his leg was amputated. So you talk about just a more heartbreak on top of an already gut-wrenching loss for this family. Hallie?
I think some people might be hearing this going, wait a second, how is it not standard police procedure to, when you have a victim who cannot be identified, go to the address on this person's ID, right, at minimum? You've got, and I know that our teams, I know that John has been following this doggedly from the start here, because Jackson officials are seeming to chalk this whole thing up to like chain of command errors, clerical errors, et cetera. Anything new from them now on this? Anything as it relates to accountability for Wade's family?
Hallie, no accountability at this point, but we are seeing the finger pointing beginning to happen. So officials say that they did attempt to call Dexter Wade's mother and that she did not answer that call. They weren't able to get in touch with her. Meanwhile, the mom says that she didn't receive a call. She doesn't have a record of a missed call. But here's what the city of Jackson is saying about it now. They're saying from the moment the coroner arrived on scene of the accident until the moment Dexter Wade was buried, his body was in the custody of Hinds County and not the city of Jackson. The authority to examine, bury, and/or exhume lies with Hinds County and not the city of Jackson. So you hear them there putting it on the county. We did reach out to the county, to the coroner's office, and NBC News did not hear back. But meanwhile, the family is now calling for an investigation by the Department of Justice to try to get some answers and to try to get some accountability here. Hallie?
Priscilla Thompson, we're so glad to have you continuing to stay on top of this story, as we will continue to do here at NBC News. Thanks. Let's get you over to the 5 things our team thinks you should know about tonight. Number 1, the UK is now the first country to approve gene therapy treatment for sickle cell disease today. It's the first medicine to be licensed that uses CRISPR, you know, that groundbreaking tool, that gene editing tool. The country's medical regulator is approving this treatment for anybody older than the age of 12. Number 2, the head of U.S. marketing for Anheuser-Busch is leaving. This is after months of controversy surrounding their brand. You see it here, Bud Light, which got so much backlash for partnering with a transgender influencer. The company says the exec is leaving to embark on a new chapter in his career, one that clearly does not involve this particular beer company. Number 3, police are had evacuated key Democratic headquarters here, the Democratic National Committee headquarters in Washington. You see some of the video here. We are now learning that President Biden has been in touch with campaign staffers, with DNC staffers, people there. After this all happened, pro-Palestinian demonstrators demanding a ceasefire in Gaza clash with Capitol Police. Capitol Police, for their part, said they tried to hold back something like 150 people, saying that they were illegally and violently protesting. 6 officers are now getting medical attention. At least 1 person was arrested. While this was happening, you had top Democratic House leadership inside the building at the time. Number 4, the eye drop recall we've been telling you about is now expanding to more than 24 products. The FDA says bacteria found in some of the drops can cause eye infections, problems with your vision, even blindness. The drops are made in India and sold in big stores like CVS, Target, Walmart. You've got to look at expiration dates. Look out for any drops with expiration dates from now until September 2025 that fit under this umbrella. We've got more on our website. Number 5, the Oakland A's, the Oakland Athletics are officially moving to Vegas after a unanimous vote from MLB owners. This is the first time a team has moved locations in like a long time, since 2005. For years, there have been complaints over the team's stadium. They haven't had any success trying to build a new one in the area. The new stadium will be on the Vegas Strip with plans to reopen in 2028. When we come back, a new warning for dog owners where doctors say a deadly, contagious disease is spreading. Plus, why a letter from Osama bin Laden from decades ago is now going viral on TikTok, if you can believe it. Tonight, a letter written by the man who orchestrated the 9/11 terror attacks. A letter trying to justify that horrific attack is now going viral on social media more than 20 years after it was first released. It's from Osama bin Laden, who called it, I'm quoting here, a letter to America, writing it a year or so after the horrific attack here. But now, new social media posts putting new attention on this. Millions of views here in the wake of the Israel-Hamas war. In this letter, bin Laden goes into his issues with Western involvement in Muslim countries, criticizes America's support for Israel, its policies in the Palestinian territories. There are anti-Semitic propaganda statements in it. This whole thing has escalated so much that The Guardian, which originally published this letter back in 2002, right, more than 20 years ago, they just pulled it off its site. It's been on its website for 20 years. Now it's not because of all this. The Guardian says, I'm quoting here, that the transcript published on our site in 2002 has been widely shared on social media without the full context. Therefore, we've decided to take it down and direct readers to the news article that originally contextualized it instead. The White House also talking about this, saying there is never a justification for spreading the repugnant, evil, and anti-Semitic lies that the leader of al-Qaeda issued just after committing the worst terror attack in American history. I want to bring in Jake Ward for more on this. And Jake, explain why there's been this resurgence of interest in this letter now, because I think it is so baffling to some people who obviously lived through what happened on 9/11 and the aftermath there.
Yeah, you know, this one really just goes to the very heart of this social media moment that we're in here, right, Hallie? I mean, at this moment, there is, of course, so much polarization and so much bitter debate about the events in the Middle East. And of course, that is the stuff that fuels the attention economy of a platform like TikTok, like Instagram, like any place where people go on and try to speak about the current political moment, drawing on what they hope will be information that will be surprising to the people who tune in. And as a result, you've got people, for some reason, stumbling upon this Guardian publication of the letter back from 2002 and seizing upon it. And as a result, I mean, you know, what's interesting is that if you imagine somebody so young that they were not around, right, for the events of September 11th, and if they were to quickly read through Osama bin Laden's letter, maybe their eyes would fall on a couple of things that suggest to them that it's worth repeating. You know, he speaks about, for instance, the Kyoto Protocol, and he speaks about the responsibility of American taxpayers for the funding that led to wars around the world. But you would also, it would be really important that you not miss the rest of that letter, which includes all sorts of vile stuff, you know, anti-Semitic tropes about how Jews are in charge of the country and all kinds of terrible things. He blames the HIV virus and the AIDS epidemic as being sort of God's, you know, revenge on homosexuality. I mean, awful stuff. So first of all, if you're going to repeat something like this, you better read the whole thing. And second of all, I think this is just the moment we're in. People just did not, for some reason, have the attention span to look around and realize who this person was, what he orchestrated, the lives that were lost in the United States. All of that seems to have been lost in this sort of, you know, attention-getting bubble moment that we seem to be living in here, Hallie.
To be transparent in sort of the ethos of this show, which is just being sort of honest with people about this, there is a conversation, right, about does even talking about how this letter has gone viral simply give it more attention? And what you're talking about here, the attention economy of the moment, but it has become newsworthy in part because of the response or not from social media companies, right? Talk through that piece of it here.
Well, that is what is so interesting, right? You can imagine an earlier day when somehow, a social media company would say, well, everyone's got a right to, sort things out. And this idea, there's always been this sort of idea, on social media, at least in its earliest days, that, a sort of a free market of ideas mean the best ideas will rise to the top. But in the last few years, we've obviously seen both in the policy discussions that come from these platforms and in the regulations that they have imposed that no one's under that illusion anymore. That, of course, really vile stuff rises to the top all the time, and the marketplace of ideas does not work as it's supposed to. And in this case, TikTok very quickly acted to take this stuff down. And they say in the statement, a public statement, that they are not going to allow this stuff. They're taking down that content because they have a policy of not supporting or promoting terrorist ideology or speech that would support terrorist causes. And if there is anything we can agree on, even in a weird moment like this, it's that Osama bin Laden's letter to the United States, written after killing thousands of Americans on purpose, is a supporting of terrorist ideology. And unfortunately, it just seems to have made its way into the attention economy in this way that nobody saw coming here, Hallie.
Jake Ward, thanks so much for that reporting. NBC News covers hundreds of other stories every day, and because it can be tough to read or watch or listen to them all, our bureau teams have done it for you. This is what they tell us is going down in their regions in a segment we call The Local. Out of our Midwest bureau, the Iowa teenager convicted of killing his Spanish teacher, now sentenced to life in prison. Prosecutors say he beat his teacher with a baseball bat back in 2021 over a bad grade. He'll be up for parole in 25 years. Out of our Northeast Bureau, federal prosecutors and the NYPD are announcing what they're calling the biggest counterfeit goods bust in history in this country. This is a picture, some of the warehouses where this stuff, all of this merchandise was stored. 2 people were arrested and charged with trafficking more than 200,000 fake bags and other luxury stuff estimated to be worth about $1 billion. And out of our Western Bureau, health officials in Portland, Oregon, in that area, are warning dog owners about a deadly respiratory disease that's spreading in pets in that area. More than 100 dogs have gotten sick with a pneumonia that is resistant to antibiotics. Multiple dogs have died, they say. Officials are now telling dog owners, steer clear of some of the dog parks nearby. They say this disease cannot be transmitted to humans. Coming up here in the show, some folks in Oregon are trying to move the border. We'll tell you what they want and the reality check on whether it could actually happen. I went out there to find more for our new series, Divided States of America. That's coming up in just a sec. We are now less than a year out from the 2024 presidential election, just a couple of months away from the first caucus in the country in Iowa. And as we get closer and closer to people heading to the polls to pick who they want to lead the country, we're taking a look at some of the issues dividing us most, the issues that people vote on, in a new special series we're calling Divided States of America. Over the next year, we're bringing you these stories from all over the country. And tonight, we're taking you out west, specifically out to Oregon, a state that's gone blue in the last 9 straight presidential elections. But not everybody's down with that blue streak in Oregon. Some people are concerned about some of the policies in place, feeling like they don't have a voice. Instead, they want part of Oregon to secede, meaning split off, and join Idaho instead. We're taking a look at why. It's sure not Portland. Eastern Oregon, home to one of the state's biggest rodeos and home to one of the biggest onion harvests in the country.
Whatever it takes.
Paul Skeen's been on this land for decades.
That's my dad. He was the quarterback.
Part of a long line of farmers in Oregon.
And these are my daughter's 3 kids right here.
We've been very blessed, raised our kids, have plenty to be thankful for, but I hate to give it all to a state that in most cases doesn't agree with anything that I agree with.
That's why these days he and his wife wish they were 800 feet further east in Idaho.
We get older and we find out there's the death tax, 16% death tax.
Only 13 states have a death tax.
Some people might hear this and go, well, hey, then why not move?
And we probably will.
But why am I being forced to move? This is the big frustration. You know, I built my home, I raised my family there, my grandkids come there. We built our life here in this home.
So instead of moving their farm, they want to move the border.
Just make us part of Idaho then.
Most people in Oregon live west of the Cascades, clustered around more liberal cities like Portland, Eugene, and the capital of Salem, with Democrats dominating the state government. Out east, most of the land, but fewer people.
People in Eastern Oregon simply don't have the numbers to stop any policy coming from the west side of the state.
It's why Matt McCaw is helping to lead the Greater Idaho Push, an initiative to try to secede or split off parts of Eastern Oregon to join their more conservative neighbor. 12 of Oregon's 36 counties have already voted to start formal discussions about joining Idaho, a state with looser gun laws and environmental regulations and tighter abortion restrictions.
We have this cultural divide. There is animosity. There is this tension and frustration that comes when one side tries to force their value system, their beliefs, their policy on the other. So let's find some solutions, and we can do that by matching people up with the government they want.
In the last few years, groups of people in Illinois, Colorado, and Southern California have explored separating from their states, which McCaw thinks could be a solid solution for a lot of folks.
This is a tool that we could use anywhere to get people government that makes sense for them.
But talking about secession is a lot easier than actually doing it. To make where I'm standing here in Oregon part of Idaho, which is just across the river, both state legislatures would have to approve it. And even if both sides of the Snake River agreed, it would still have to go to Congress for its green light.
And the national conversation right now is just sort of talking about the divide and not the way to come together.
Journalist Leah Sotilli covers the Pacific Northwest, watching plenty of national media parachute in to cover this secession initiative over the last year.
In the reporting that I've done, that shows that it really is in line with past secession movements that have happened in Oregon and the Northwest, which have been informed by racial politics, by identity politics of the day.
Some secession advocates acknowledge they may be railing at windmills here, but the publicity's part of the point, to try to get the attention of people like Oregon Governor Tina Kotek on a listening tour across the state.
We are thrilled to have you all here today.
In an interview with the local CBS station earlier this year, she made clear she wants to address frustrations and move forward as one state.
I want to reset this relationship with rural Oregonians so they feel heard, that they are part of the decision making, and making sure that their communities can be successful.
Back in Eastern Oregon at a county meeting.
But your website acts like we voted to join Idaho. You're not being honest.
Far from universal support to split off.
Our country is divided enough as it is.
If you did that in the United States and tried to move borders all over, I mean, what a chaotic thing you have there.
Yet another shifting fault line in our divided states.
If all the population gets all the vote and has all the power, what does that say for the rest of us? Why even go vote?
It sounds like some of what this is that you feel powerless.
We are.
We are totally powerless.
Our thanks to the many people who talked to us for that story. We've got more coming up, too, in our next installment of Divided States of America. You're going to meet some of the realtors helping to settle people they describe as political refugees into their new communities. As we are on the air, the Israeli military storming into Gaza's main hospital again, going building to building inside the site that has hundreds of patients apparently stuck inside. What we're hearing in just the last couple of minutes from the Secretary of State going one-on-one literally in the last hour with our own Lester Holt. We've got that in just a second. Plus, a mistrial declared in the case of a former Louisville police officer who fired bullets in the deadly raid that killed Breonna Taylor. We'll break down what this means for the case and what now comes next. Plus, a big question here in Washington tonight in Congress, not if, but when specifically is George Santos going to leave Congress after a new ethics report claims he used campaign money to pay for stuff like Botox, OnlyFans, a Vegas honeymoon. More on that in just a sec. Also just into it, Sean Combs, who you may know as Diddy, accused of rape and years of abuse by a former girlfriend, a singer who was once on his record label. What she's saying tonight and what his reps are telling NBC News. Plus, a Red Cup rebellion today. Thousands of Starbucks workers walking off the job on one of the biggest days of the year for the company. We'll take you live to one for the latest twist in a years-long labor fight a little later on in the show. Hey there, I'm Hallie, and tonight, Israeli forces are storming inside Gaza's main hospital now for the second time in just 24 hours, according to Israeli officials. This is what has unfolded there today. IDF soldiers searching building to building at Al-Shifa hospital, the place now at the center of this war, as we're seeing more calls to get the hundreds of patients trapped inside out safely. Patients, including dozens of premature babies. Israel says this woman, Yehudit Weiss, a hostage held captive by Hamas, was found dead at a location close to the hospital in just the last few hours. She was 65 years old. The Israelis now calling Al-Shifa a terrorist cell. Remember, Israel says it has intel showing that Hamas is operating inside the building. And President Biden, in just the last 24 hours, is accusing Hamas of committing a war crime by having headquarters under the hospital. Hamas and doctors inside deny this. Our Lester Holt, literally in just the last hour, going one-on-one with Secretary of State Tony Blinken on why the U.S. also says Hamas is operating in and around Al-Shifa. Listen to this.
Israel is showing video of weapons it says were recovered at the Al-Shifa hospital. Video of what may be a tunnel, but it's clear that the evidence doesn't necessarily point to a Hamas command and control center, as Israel and the U.S. have maintained. What's happening there?
Exactly why there should be assault rifles located next to an MRI machine escapes me. And this is compelling evidence of the fact that Hamas embeds itself in civilian infrastructure of one kind or another, hospitals, schools, apartment buildings, in them or under them, in its tunnels, and uses the civilians there as human shields.
More from that interview on Nightly in a few minutes, but we should note here, it's hard to know what exactly is happening inside this hospital right now. It's hard to really get a sense of the visibility of the reality on the ground because of just trickles of information that we're getting now drying up. NBC News tried to call the doctors inside that our teams have been talking to for days, with many of those calls not answered today, making this all even more complicated. Another near complete blackout, phone, internet in this area, according to Gaza's biggest provider. All of it, as the White House late today says it's probably impossible for Israel to completely eliminate Hamas. I want to bring in Keir Simmons, who is live for us on the ground in Tel Aviv. Keir, let's start with this hospital, right at the center of the fighting in Gaza. I know you've been talking with some of the doctors inside for days. It is harder to get them on the phone, as you are now hearing, as we are, what Secretary Blinken is telling Lester about how the U.S. sees what's happening at this hospital. Talk us through what stands out to you.
Well, I think it's important to hear what the Secretary of State says there, because he is effectively backing, it sounds like, the assessment of the Israelis having gone into Al-Shifa, and that's important. Why is a hospital so crucial in all of this? Because it is a kind of symbol, isn't it, of the civilian side of all of this, Hallie, and the question over whether what Israel is doing in relation to the civilian population in Gaza is justifiable after what happened on October 7th. And there is a real question there. Just take, for example, what's happening at the United Nations, where a resolution at the Security Council was not blocked by the US. That's really significant. Mostly the US would use its veto in a vote like that. It didn't. And take a listen to what the French ambassador at the UN told me about how this balance, this question, this idea of judging, if you like, Israel's approach to all this is being viewed in the international community.
We need to draw a very clear line between what is allowed, which is, eradicating terrorism, which probably has to be done, and especially when you see the situation in Israel, the attack that took place 5 weeks ago, and protecting the civilians who have nothing to do with that.
It's important, Hallie, not least because Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, has been clear that Israel will continue to pursue its goals of eradicating Hamas and its capabilities. And now we are seeing the likelihood that the Israeli forces will push further south. This isn't finishing now, Hallie.
Keir, the other piece of this is, of course, among the many pieces of this, the hostages abducted by those Hamas terrorists on that attack against Israel back on October 7th here. We are just learning, and we talked about it right at the top of the show here, an Israeli woman, a hostage, who's been now found dead, according to the Israelis. What else do we know about what's happening, not just, obviously, with her family dealing with this, but also with the rest of the people who are still being kidnapped and held by Hamas?
Yeah, there are two aspects of this, Hallie, aren't there? One is just the misery, the pain for that family. This 65-year-old woman who'd been suffering from cancer, taken hostage and now found. And then the other aspect, what it means for her body to be found near to the Al-Shifa hospital, what that means for what Israel is trying to say about the hospital. I just want to read to you what the Israeli Defense Force is saying about this. The body of Yehuda Weiss was abducted by the Hamas terrorist organization, was extracted by IDF troops from a structure adjacent to the Shifa hospital in the Gaza Strip and was transferred to the Israeli territory. In the structure in which Yehuda was located, military equipment, including Kalashnikov rifles and RPGs, were also found. So initially we saw that video from the IDF saying they had found some weapons, some grenades. Didn't look like necessarily a Hamas headquarters. Now you have the Israelis suggesting they found more, and they will consider that to be more evidence that where their intelligence was accurate.
Keir Simmons, thank you so much. Live for us there in Tel Aviv. A lot of moving pieces, as always. Appreciate it. Again, you can catch more of Lester's interview with the Secretary of State tonight on NBC Nightly News. That's 6:30 Eastern. However you watch your local NBC station, do not miss it. We've got some other news happening here in the United States tonight, because in a Texas courtroom, a jury is hearing emotional testimony in the sentencing phase of the trial for the woman convicted in just the last couple of hours of murdering a pro-cyclist in a jealous rage. You see Kaitlin Armstrong, that's the back of her head, standing up here as the judge reads the verdict. Remember, Moriah Wilson had been riding her mountain bike over to a friend's apartment back in May of last year when Armstrong shot her 3 times. That happened just hours after Wilson went swimming and had dinner with Armstrong's boyfriend, Colin Strickland. He's also a cyclist. Strickland and Wilson had dated for a little while before his relationship with Armstrong. After the murder, investigators say Armstrong went to Costa Rica, got plastic surgery, changed her hair. Morgan Chesky is joining us now. And Morgan, this is developing even tonight here. People close to Wilson taking the stand before Armstrong gets a sentence. They have moved from the guilty or not guilty phase into the sentencing phase in just the last few hours here. Tell us more about what's happening in the building behind you.
Yeah, Hallie, still waiting to hear what that sentencing will be for Kaitlin Armstrong. We did see the jury be dismissed just minutes ago, and I can say that the family of Kaitlin Armstrong just walked out a few seconds prior in silence, not saying anything right now. And that followed a series of victim impact statements that were shared by the family of Moriah Wilson inside the courtroom. We had a chance to hear from her brother, who shared how he relied on his sister to help him through some incredibly dark times, saying that they would call each other daily and find 3 things to be grateful about. We heard from Moriah Wilson's mother, who said that the joy that a mother feels when they bring a child into this world is felt in loss and sadness when they are taken out of it. She was the only one, notably, Hallie, who looked or made eye contact with Kaitlin Armstrong following this statement. Her father also spoke. Each family member just incredibly emotional at this now next chapter. The fact that a guilty verdict has been presented, and now all eyes are looking forward to that sentencing phase, which as of right now is still unknown, although we do know she faces up to potentially life in prison here, Hallie.
What was part of the trial here was the prosecutors didn't have necessarily firsthand witnesses here or any super hard evidence showing that Armstrong committed this crime, but they did have circumstantial evidence here. That was largely what was presented, right?
They called it a mountain of circumstantial evidence, Hallie. They pointed to DNA found on Wilson's bike that belonged to Armstrong, GPS routes that showed Armstrong's black Jeep driving around the block where this crime scene took place in the hours leading up to it. Cell phone signals matching her car's path. They also pointed out to the fact that after this took place, 2 friends of Armstrong called police independently of each other and said on separate occasions they had seen her become essentially consumed by rage and threatened to kill Armstrong. So those were just some of the pieces of evidence they pointed to that convinced this jury of 12 to spend less than 2 hours to come to a conclusion in this nearly 2-week-long trial. Hallie?
Morgan Chesky live for us there in Austin, Texas. Morgan, I know you got more reporting to do tonight. I'll let you go do it. Thank you very much for bringing us the latest from what's happening inside court here. Out west, we are hearing tonight for the first time from the former House Speaker since the man accused of attacking her husband with a hammer was found guilty by a jury in San Francisco. David DePape, now convicted on 2 counts, included attempted kidnapping of a federal official after going after Paul Pelosi at his house in October last year. DePape now faces a potential life sentence. Steve Patterson is joining us now. Steve, you were in the courtroom today for the delivery of this verdict. The eyes of so many people were on that courtroom. Talk to us about what you saw, what you heard, where this goes.
You know, after a deliberation that spanned 8 hours over the course of essentially 2 days and a break in between, deliberations today were very quick. The judge reads the rights to the jury addresses the court with the verdict. Count 1 guilty, count 2 guilty, and that's really it in all of about 10 minutes. The thing I was watching for, though, was any sign or hint or glimmer of a hint of any emotion from David DePape sitting there as that verdict was being read. And really what has been par for the course this entire trial, he showed no emotion. The only time we really got to see that emotion is when he took the stand himself to talk about some of these conspiracy theories that he clearly holds dear to himself. So the new stuff really came after the verdict. We, for the first time, really got as close to a direct statement, I think, as we're going to get from Nancy Pelosi during the trial. She's spoken before the trial, but not since. We got a statement from the family. She released something that said the Pelosi family is very proud of their pop, who demonstrated extraordinary composure and courage on the night of the attack a year ago and in the courtroom this week. Thankfully, Mr. Pelosi continues to make progress in his recovery. He testified in a harrowing bed for about 45 minutes. Obviously, the family very proud of what he did. Sentencing is next. It's believed to be on the 11th, and then it moves to a state trial. Hallie?
Steve Patterson, live for us there in San Francisco. Steve, thank you. They're calling it the Red Cup Rebellion right now. Thousands of Starbucks workers walking off the job today, part of this years-long battle with the company over union benefits, unionization. The one-day strike meant to protest what workers say is too much demand, especially on days with discounts and free stuff like today, Red Cup Day. This is this annual thing where customers can get a reusable red cup, like one of these, if they order a holiday drink. Promo days like this, a real source of dread for some of these baristas, they say.
So we just have basically an infinite amount of drinks, and we're understaffed, and we're underpaid, and we're sick of it.
Some of these workers say this is a crush of people, these special promo days, on top of what's usually a rush anyway, the mobile orders, the drive-through, the in-store orders. Starbucks has seen a labor wave over the last couple years, with more than 360 stores in nearly every state voting to create unions since late 2021. With union workers saying Starbucks won't come to the table. But Starbucks is pointing the finger right back, saying in a statement, we again call on Workers United to fulfill their obligations and engage in the work of negotiating first contracts. NBC's Noah Pransky is outside of Starbucks in New York. Tell me what you've been hearing from workers about what they want to get out of this strike today.
I think workers are looking for a change in culture. It's not so much about red cups as it is about worker treatment. And that's not just in New York City, that's nationally. Take a look at today's walkout by the numbers, the largest we've seen from Starbucks workers in 2 years of organization here. 5,000 workers across the country in 200 different locations walking off the job. Now, that's just a fraction of Starbucks stores, but obviously a major impact. Some of those stores, it seems, were not able to open today. A lot of them did. But protesters were telling us that they were burnt out, they feel fatigued, and a whole host of other complaints about the Starbucks Corporation. Have a listen.
We've been trying to negotiate with Starbucks, but they will do anything to, like, not meet with us, so they'll stall.
Start bargaining with us, you know, listen to what we have to say, at least come to any kind of, you know, cooperative place for us to build up a contract.
So, Hallie, Starbucks, obviously one of the many union groups protesting, walking off the job in some cases this year, but they're hoping to have the same kind of success that we've seen with other union groups who have led to either strikes or very close to it, as we saw in the case of like UPS, for instance.
Well, you talk about sort of the broad issue of unionization, labor movements in this country more broadly, something we've covered a ton here on this show. Starbucks workers have filed more than 70 complaints just where you are in New York City for labor law violations, including 14 just today. Help us understand those and some of those allegations and how Starbucks is responding.
So the macro picture here is that the complaint is refusal to bargain with these new unions that have cropped up all over the country. But at the micro level here in New York City has a law to protect baristas and fast food workers. It's called the Fair Work Week Law, and they're alleging that Starbucks is violating it. It guarantees workers that they have regular schedules, that they get advance notice if their schedules change, extra pay if there's change. But workers also point to the bottom line, and they say on days like today where there are discounts and huge promotions, The company is profiting, the worker is not, and they point to the bottom line, $36 billion in revenue for Starbucks this past fiscal year, up 12% from the previous one. They say it's not fair. They want a bigger share of those profits. Hallie?
Noah Bransky live for us in New York. Thanks. To Washington now, where President Biden, well, I shouldn't say to Washington, out west, because that is where President Biden actually is. Why? Well, the economy. He is trying to really work on the way that our international partners work with the United States at this big summit out in San Francisco in the Bay Area. We're actually expecting to see and hear more from him in the next couple of minutes. But here's what's getting a lot of attention as we speak right now. The moment when he called the Chinese president, Xi Jinping, a dictator. It happened just literally hours after that huge meeting to try to get both of these nations, both of these leaders back on talking terms. Not even great terms, just talking terms. A meeting that the president himself called really productive. But the Secretary of State's reaction in the moment when President Biden made that dictator comment kind of says a lot. Watch.
And Mr. President, after today, would you still refer to President Xi as a dictator? This is a term that you used earlier this year.
Well, look, he is. I mean, he's a dictator in the sense that he is a guy who runs a country that is a communist country that's based on a form of government totally different than ours.
You saw the reaction from the Secretary of State there. I want to bring in now our Monica Alba to talk through some of what is now the fallout / perhaps scramble at least a little bit today. Listen, I'm not a certified body language reader. I am not sitting inside Tony Blinken's head, right? Like I don't, but what we could visibly see on cameras was notable for the timing and the reaction here, especially considering that President Biden had already called Xi Jinping a dictator just months ago, Mon, right? I mean, you've talked about the sense of deja vu. I wonder how your sources are framing the way that the White House is looking to walk back some of what the president said as he is looking to, and the White House is looking to really get this U.S.-China relationship back on some kind of track.
And they do feel, Hallie, like that goal, for now at least, has been reached, given the big deliverables, the outcomes of things they actually talked about in those meetings yesterday and came away with in terms of action items that they're implementing on things like restoring military-to-military communications, tackling the flow of fentanyl. But it was a little less than ideal, you could put it, certainly, that the president resurrected this comment, these beliefs that obviously he does hold in terms of calling Xi Jinping a dictator. He laid it out pretty clearly there in response to a reporter's question of why he feels that way. And in talking to senior administration officials today, they said, look, we know certainly that the Chinese officials were not thrilled with that. In fact, they said they felt that language was a little bit irresponsible, but this did not cause any kind of a diplomatic blow-up that would derail what they feel was the progress made on some of those other fronts. Hallie.
How about progress on so-called panda diplomacy, Mon? Because this is something that's getting a ton of attention today, too. This hint from Xi Jinping that perhaps the pandas, which just got ripped out of the Washington Zoo, where we are here, might be coming back to the United States, back specifically to San Diego. No official confirmation here, but some heavy hinting. Is that fair to say? I know you've been working every one of your sources on this one, Mon.
Absolutely, Hallie, around the clock. That is beyond fair to say, and it really was a big surprise here to U.S. officials who had not been tracking this to be on the agenda. It's something over the last couple of weeks that we thought could be a part of these conversations. They said don't have any high hopes for that. So then when President Xi made the announcement, they were kind of taken aback in a good way. They said that that was really a goodwill gesture and that they would absolutely welcome that. These negotiations and agreements happened between the Chinese government and specific American zoos. So if that's something that happens, the San Diego Zoo, for instance, which was the one name-checked last night by President Xi, they tell me they would be very thrilled to welcome more pandas. They had some that left in 2019, and the only remaining pandas currently in the United States are at the Atlanta Zoo, but they're scheduled to leave next year. So a lot of interest, of course, in seeing these pandas return to the U.S. elsewhere. Hallie.
Monica Alba live for us in San Francisco. I know we'll talk again. Mon, appreciate it. Back to Washington now, specifically to the Capitol, because it turns out a controversial Republican lawmaker will leave Congress. Only question is when, after a brand new ethics report accuses George Santos of spending thousands of dollars on Botox and OnlyFans and a Vegas honeymoon. It's why George Santos is announcing today he's not going to run for re-election. So he's definitely not going to be a part of the next Congress. Thing is, are his colleagues going to kick him out even sooner than that? A lot of reaction from some of those colleagues tonight to that ethics report, which unanimously found substantial evidence that Santos committed fraud, they say, spending tens of thousands of dollars of campaign money on stuff that did not have to do with his campaign at all. Like what, you may ask? Here's what some of the allegations are. $6,000 worth of stuff at Ferragamo stores, $2,000 at resorts in Atlantic City, $1,400 at a skin spa in New York, $4,000 at Hermes. Ryan Nobles is joining us now. Let me just preface. If members of Congress want to go and spend money on Botox, power to them, right? Like, no. Yeah. If members of Congress want to go and spend campaign money, right, money raised for the campaign on Botox, that's when you maybe have some of these issues that come up, as this ethics report pretty clearly lays out. So talk to me about what you're hearing from some of Santos's colleagues on the Hill, because he's out, right? He's not running for re-election. That's its own bombshell. Is he going to get kicked out even before 2025?
Yeah, and I'll add to that, too, Hallie. It's not just about using campaign funds to buy stuff like that. It's also lying about it on the reports that you file with the federal government, which is part of what this report exposes. And you do get a sense that the dam is starting to break for George Santos. This has been a long, drawn-out process, and it's really frustrated a lot of his fellow members that he remains an active member of Congress despite this cloud of controversy that's hanging over his head. But kind of the big holdup that prevented him from moving, I should say the Congress moving to a full expulsion, was this idea that he deserved due process. And the sense we're getting from many of these members that were previous holdouts is that this ethics report was that due process. He had the right to defend himself to this committee. He didn't avail himself to that right. And not to mention that they came up with a lot of hard evidence, which you already outlined, demonstrating his malfeasance. And this is what the House Speaker said tonight. And it's coded language. This comes from his spokesperson, Raj Shah. But this is what he says. The Speaker has reviewed the report and its very troubling findings. And this is the important part. Speaker Johnson encourages all involved to consider the best interests of the institution as this matter is addressed further. Now, he doesn't come right out and say it, but you could certainly read between the lines that he's not going to stop anyone from voting yes on an expulsion vote. Remember, it requires 2/3 of the House to kick him out, but we could see that vote happen in the very near future, Hallie.
Well, that's interesting there from the Speaker, because, you know, there had been a point previously where George Santos seemed to have some friends, not necessarily friends from the New York Republican delegation, of which he is a part, right? But like maybe some potential allies. Does he still have those allies? Who are his friends?
I mean, I've yet to see one member come forward and defend him after this report came out. There was a concern, I think, during the previous speakership of Kevin McCarthy about the margins, the reduced number of members available to vote Republican on key measures. That doesn't appear to be the same level of stress that Republicans once had. I think when they balanced the pros and cons on that sheet, these allegations against him were just too heavy for them to handle. And plus, these New York Republicans, which are a vital voting bloc for Speaker Johnson, were just getting antsy. They did not want him as part of their delegation, and they were really pressing for movement on this. Now, a lot could happen between now and when this vote actually takes place, but you do get the sense that this report has changed everything as it relates to George Santos. Hallie.
Ryan Nobles, thank you very much. Coming up here on the show, a lot more to get to in what is turning out to be a very busy news evening, including some new details tonight in that big sign-stealing scandal just rocking the Big Ten, with the head coach at the center of it is now agreeing to do. Plus, the FDA expanding its eye drop recall to more than 24 products, what safety experts say you need to watch out for. Some news just breaking into us in the last hour or so. A federal judge declaring a mistrial in the latest attempt to hold Louisville officers accountable for the death of Breonna Taylor. We're talking about Brett Hankerson in this instance. He's a former officer who fired shots into Taylor's home during a botched raid back in 2020. He'd been facing federal civil rights charges of using excessive force, but the judge tonight has declared this mistrial after the jury apparently deadlocked on the charges. NBC Shaquille Brewster is following this for us. Shaq, you know, I think from the very beginning of this effort to hold the officers involved in Breonna Taylor's death accountable, there have been frustrations, I think, on the part of the people who wanted to see that. Talk about that piece of it, what could happen next, because remember, even the initial charges here against these officers did not correspond directly to the death of Breonna Taylor. It was about these other excessive force, et cetera. So talk us through some of this.
Yeah, Hallie, let's start with Brett Hankinson, because today the judge declared the mistrial. The jury unable to come to a conclusion on the 2 counts that he was facing. These were federal counts. He was accused of violating the civil rights of Breonna Taylor and her boyfriend and the family in a neighboring apartment. When prosecutors say he went to a window and sliding glass door and returned fire essentially blindly. Those doors and windows were covered by curtains and blinds, and prosecutors said that he was unjustified in using that force. Now, Hankinson did take the stand in this trial. He said that he was trying to protect his own life and the lives of his officers. But, you know, this is the second time now that a jury has not been able to convict him for his connection to the raid that led to Breonna Taylor's death. Now, you mentioned there's been the calls for accountability for this entire situation here. None of the officers involved in her death directly, who were there that night, have been so-called held accountable, in the words of the family there. There has been one former officer, who has pleaded guilty for essentially providing false information for a warrant. But for the officers involved in her death, there hasn't been any conclusion to those trials. And when you look at this trial, it's a mistrial right now. So that means in about a month or so, the judge will call everyone back and see what the next steps are. It's possible that the federal government can go ahead and take him through trial again, but it's really an open question over the next steps in this case that really caused a lot of strife in that community, Hallie.
Shaq Brewster, thank you so much for that update. We've got some other breaking news just into us here tonight. One of the most famous men in hip-hop now being accused of rape and years of sexual abuse by his former girlfriend in a lawsuit. We're talking about Sean Combs. You know him as Diddy. The accusations that he allegedly controlled Cassie, she's a singer whose real name is Cassandra Ventura, for years. According to this lawsuit, Diddy constantly plied her with drugs, beat her, forced her to have sex with male prostitutes on camera. Ventura saying in a statement today, and I'm quoting here, "After years in silence and darkness, I am finally ready to tell my story and to speak up on behalf of myself and for the benefit of other women who face violence and abuse in their relationships." Combs' lawyer telling our team he vehemently denies the allegations, calling them offensive and outrageous. I want to bring in our legal analyst, Danny Savalos. And Danny, this lawsuit is just making a lot of news here, right? I mean, this dropped just within the last hour or so. Walk us through what it says and what could come next.
The allegations are pretty terrible. I mean, they're worth reading and not getting into in too much detail here. They wouldn't be right for TV. But essentially, this is a civil lawsuit. The allegations sound as if they are criminal allegations, but this is only a civil lawsuit. And interestingly enough, the plaintiff's attorneys are saying that apparently, allegedly, the defense here Combs offered money, a lot of money, to resolve this prior to filing a lawsuit. Well, that may be interesting, but it's not going to be admissible evidence because these offers to compromise normally don't come in as evidence against the defendant. But all in all, these allegations are pretty horrific.
From a defense perspective, we've already heard now, and again, I realize this is not a criminal case, obviously, but with what we've heard from the reps for Diddy, for Sean Combs here, how do you anticipate this moves forward?
So I have a few cases under the Child Victims Act in New York, which is a similar one-year window to bring up allegations that may be otherwise barred by the statute of limitations. And normally the challenge is for older cases finding witnesses. But I have to imagine with all of the people, the assistants, the infrastructure surrounding Diddy, that there have to be witnesses that will either say yay or nay, one way or another, either support P. Diddy or support the plaintiff in this case, because these are people that were just surrounded at all times by so many other people. I have to imagine there are going to be witnesses that are going to have a story to tell.
Danny Savalos, thank you very much. NBC News Tonight also has some more exclusive details in the disturbing case of a man run over by police and then buried without his family even knowing about it. The lawyer for the family of Dexter Wade, who was hit by a Mississippi police car back in March, says an independent autopsy found Wade, at the time of the accident, had on him an ID. He had ID on him with his home address on that ID. Why is that such a big deal? Because police did not notify Wade's family about this accident, about his death, for months. So even as Dexter Wade's mother spent an agonizing 172 days looking for him, Wade had been buried in what you just saw, that unmarked marked only with a number, I should say, pauper's grave. We've been covering the story on this network every step of the way, led by the reporter who broke it, NBC's John Shupe, who reports tonight that minutes after leaving his home back in March, Dexter Wade was hit by a Jackson police cruiser as he tried to cross a nearby highway on foot. After Wade's mother was finally informed of his death and where he was buried, the family requested Dexter be exhumed. But even that led to only more disappointment, because by the time that they actually got there, by the time they arrived at this gravesite on Monday, a public works crew had already removed the body with no other witnesses present. NBC's Priscilla Thompson is following this story for us. And Priscilla, it is just, this family has been living a nightmare now for months here. This autopsy, this exhumation only starts to fill in what are many blanks left by investigators in this case. Talk us through what we're hearing from the family and the reporting that we have tonight.
Yeah, Hallie, well, it appears that the nightmare continues for this family, because while this autopsy report does fill in some answers to questions, it also raises more questions, like, for example, with that wallet being found in his front pocket with an ID that had an address on it, and it was an address that was shared with his mother. Why didn't any official go to that address and attempt to notify the family? The other thing that we're learning from this independent autopsy is also more about the injuries that he sustained, and also what his laying to rest by officials looked like. The pathologist saying that there was an advanced state of decomposition for the body, appearing that he had not been embalmed, and also detailing some of the injuries, including blunt force injuries to the skull, the ribs, and the pelvis, and that his left leg had been amputated. So you can imagine what Dexter Wade may have gone through in those final hours just from hearing that information, and it has got to be very difficult for his family to learn this information as well. Hallie?
They want somebody held responsible for this. Does it seem likely that that is going to happen?
Yeah, they want accountability, and they are calling on the Department of Justice to investigate what exactly happened here so that hopefully they can get that accountability. It doesn't seem that they have a lot of faith in the local officials there to do that. And when you see how this is played out, you understand why that is. The county coroner says that they attempted to call the mother to let her know that this has happened. But again, they had that state ID, and no one thought to go to the address or do anything more to notify the family. And we're also hearing from the city of Jackson on this, really pointing fingers at the county, saying from the moment the coroner arrived on scene of the accident until the moment Dexter Wade was buried, his body was in the custody of Hinds County and not the city of Jackson. The authority to examine, bury, and or exhume lies with Hinds County and not the city of Jackson. And NBC did reach out to the coroner's office for a response to that statement, and we have not heard back. Hallie?
Priscilla Thompson, so glad you're staying on top of this story, along with John Shupe. Thank you very much. Let's get you over to the 5 things our team thinks you should know about tonight. Number 1, the rate of kids and teenagers dying from cancer in this country is down about 25% in the last couple decades, according to new numbers from the CDC. Doctors say it's partly because of, or they think it's partly because of how much better immunotherapy treatments are getting. Number 2, the University of Michigan coach Jim Harbaugh is agreeing to serve a 3-game suspension today because of that sign-stealing scheme we've told you about. The Big Ten suspended him last Friday. Michigan was going to go to court tomorrow to fight it. The conference is now closing the investigation. Number 3, a new study out of China says microplastics are apparently now just floating in the clouds. Scientists say this stuff can come from things like clothes, packaging, face masks even, and can get up into the sky through the air. Researchers found these microplastics could affect how clouds form, which could obviously mean changes to weather, to temperatures around the world. Number 4, that eye drop recall we've been telling you about is now expanding to more than 24 products. The FDA says bacteria found in some of these specific drops can cause eye infections, bad vision, even blindness. These are specific drops made in India and sold in some big stores like CVS, Target, Walmart. We've got the brand names up on the website. Keep an eye out for drops with expiration dates from now until September 25. Number 5, the head of U.S. marketing for Anheuser-Busch is leaving after months of controversy around this brand, Bud Light, which, as you know, got a conservative boycott, a bunch of backlash after partnering with a transgender influencer back in March. The company says the executive is leaving to embark on a new chapter in his career. When we come back, a letter from Osama bin Laden more than 20 years after it was written, now going viral on TikTok. We'll explain. Morning. news breaking into us in just the last couple of minutes here with word now that the special counsel investigating President Biden's handling of classified documents has interviewed the president's son, Hunter Biden, according to a source familiar with the matter. A second source familiar tells us that the special counsel, Robert Hur, reached out to schedule that interview a couple of months ago. Hunter Biden had been in the president's Wilmington, Delaware home where some of the classified documents were found. He had that home listed on his driver's license, I should say. Remember, the special counsel sat down with the president himself back in October, suggesting perhaps that this investigation may be in its final stages. Tonight, a letter written by the man who orchestrated the 9/11 terror attacks, trying to justify them, is now going viral on social media more than 20 years after it was first published. Osama bin Laden called it, and I'm quoting here, a letter to America, writing it a year or so after the horrific attack here that killed thousands of Americans. Now, some social media posts are putting new attention on it, attracting millions of views in the wake of the Israel-Hamas war. New research obtained by NBC News in just the last hour shows just how much this letter has spread online. On X, which used to be Twitter, references to bin Laden are up more than 4,000% since Tuesday. TikTok saw more than 6 million views on videos showing the letter. On YouTube, searches on this were up 400%. In this letter, bin Laden goes into his issues with Western involvement in Muslim countries. He criticizes America's support of Israel, its policies in the Palestinian territories. It's anti-Semitic. There's propaganda, jihadist propaganda in there. The Guardian originally published the statement back in 2002. 2002 is when they first published it. They're now pulling it down because the Guardian tells us, I'm quoting here, the transcript published on our website in 2002 has been widely shared online without the full context. Therefore, they say, we have decided to take it down and direct readers to the news article that originally contextualized it instead. The White House also talking about this, saying there is never a justification for spreading the repugnant, evil, and anti-Semitic lies that the leader of al-Qaeda issued just after committing the worst terrorist attack in American history. Jake Ward is joining us now. And Jake, explain why there's been this resurgence of interest in this letter now, because I think it is so baffling to some people who obviously lived through what happened on 9/11 and the aftermath there.
Yeah, you know, this one really just goes to the very heart of this social media moment that we're in here, right, Hallie? I mean, at this moment, there is, of course, so much polarization and so much bitter debate about the events in the Middle East. And of course, that is the stuff that fuels the attention economy of a platform like TikTok, like Instagram, like any place where people go on and try to speak about the current political moment, drawing on what they hope will be information that will be surprising to the people who tune in. And as a result, you've got people for some reason stumbling upon this Guardian publication of the letter back from 2002 and seizing upon it. And as a result, I mean, you know, what's interesting is that if you imagine somebody so young that they were not around, right, for the events of September 11th, and if they were to quickly read through Osama bin Laden's letter, maybe their eyes would fall on a couple of things that suggest to them that it's worth repeating. You know, he speaks about, for instance, the Kyoto Protocol, and he speaks about the responsibility of American taxpayers for the funding that led to wars around the world. But you would also, it would be really important that you not miss the rest of that letter, which includes all sorts of vile stuff, of, you know, anti-Semitic tropes about how Jews are in charge of the country and all kinds of terrible things. He blames the HIV virus and the AIDS epidemic as being sort of God's, revenge on homosexuality. I mean, awful stuff. So first of all, if you're going to repeat something like this, you better read the whole thing. And second of all, I think this is just the moment we're in. People just did not, for some reason, have the attention span to look around and realize who this person was, what he orchestrated, the lives that were lost in the United States. All of that seems to have been lost in this sort of, you know, attention-getting bubble moment that we seem to be living in here, Hallie.
I want to be transparent in sort of the ethos of this show, which is just being sort of honest with people about this. There is a conversation, right, about does even talking about how this letter has gone viral simply give it more attention? And what you're talking about here, the attention economy of the moment, but it has become newsworthy in part because of the response or not from social media companies, right? Talk through that piece of it here.
Well, that is what is so interesting, right? You can imagine an earlier day when somehow, a social media company would say, well, everyone's got a right to, sort things out. And this idea, there's always been this sort of idea, on social media, at least in its earliest days, that, a sort of a free market of ideas mean the best ideas will rise to the top. But in the last few years, we've obviously seen both in the policy discussions that come from these platforms and in the regulations that they have imposed that no one's under that illusion anymore. That, of course, really vile stuff rises to the top all the time, and the marketplace of ideas does not work as it's supposed to. And in this case, TikTok very quickly acted to take this stuff down. And they say in a statement, a public statement, that they are not going to allow this stuff. They're taking down that content because they have a policy of not supporting or promoting terrorist ideology or speech that would support terrorist causes. And if there is anything we can agree on, even in a weird moment like this, it's that Osama bin Laden's letter to the United States, written after killing thousands of Americans on purpose, is a supporting of terrorist ideology. And unfortunately, it just seems to have made its way into the attention economy in this way that nobody saw coming here, Hallie.
Jake Ward, thanks so much for that reporting. NBC News covers hundreds of international stories every day, and because it can be tough to read or watch or listen to them all, our international teams have done it for you. Here are some of what they're watching in a segment we call The Global. Out of Haiti, a lot of violence exploding in the capital after an armed gang attacked a hospital, trapping nearly 100 people inside. Police eventually arrived to evacuate the hostages, which included 40 children. Gang violence has been on the rise in Haiti ever since the assassination back in 2021 of the country's president. Out of France, a 13th century painting worth $26 million is heading to the Louvre. The painting, called The Mocking of Christ, was considered lost for 4 years until it was found hanging in the kitchen of an elderly French woman a few years back. And in Scotland, an ultramarathon runner there has been banned for more than 12 months from the sport, or for exactly 12 months, after she finished a race by using a car, apparently, for part of the 50 miles. She said she was feeling sick, had a friend drive her. She claims that she tried to quit the race but finished third anyway and didn't return the trophy until race officials caught her using tracking data. Coming up, a growing push for part of one state to split off and join another. Why some folks out west would rather move the border than just move. That's in our new series, Divided States of America. Next. We are now less than a year out from the 2024 presidential election, just a couple of months away from the first caucus in the country in Iowa. And as we get closer and closer to people heading to the polls to pick who they want to lead the country, we're taking a look at some of the issues dividing us most, the issues that people vote on, in a new special series we're calling Divided States of America. Over the next year, we're bringing you these stories from all over the country. And tonight, we're taking you out west, specifically out to Oregon, a state that's gone blue in the last 9 straight presidential elections. But not everybody's down with that blue streak in Oregon. Some people are concerned about some of the policies in place, feeling like they don't have a voice. Instead, they want part of Oregon to secede, meaning split off, and join Idaho instead. We're taking a look at why. It's sure not Portland. Eastern Oregon, home to one of the state's biggest rodeos and home to one of the biggest onion harvests in the country.
Whatever it takes.
Paul Skeen's been on this land for decades.
That's my dad. He was the quarterback.
Part of a long line of farmers in Oregon.
And these are my daughter's 3 kids right here.
We've been very blessed, raised our kids, have plenty to be thankful for, but I hate to give it all to a state that in most cases doesn't agree with anything that I agree with.
That's why these days he and his wife wish they were 800 feet further east in Idaho.
We get older and we find out there's the death tax, 16% death tax.
Only 13 states have a death tax.
Some people might hear this and go, well, hey, then why not move?
And we probably will.
But why am I being forced to move? This is the big frustration. You know, I built my home, I raised my family there, my grandkids come there. We built our life here in this home.
So instead of moving their farm, they want to move the border.
Just make us part of Idaho then.
Most people in Oregon live west of the Cascades, clustered around more liberal cities like Portland, Eugene, and the capital of Salem, with Democrats dominating the state government. Out east, most of the land, but fewer people.
People in Eastern Oregon simply don't have the numbers to stop any policy coming from the west side of the state.
It's why Matt McCaw is helping to lead the Greater Idaho Push, an initiative to try to secede or split off parts of Eastern Oregon to join and their more conservative neighbor. 12 of Oregon's 36 counties have already voted to start formal discussions about joining Idaho, a state with looser gun laws and environmental regulations and tighter abortion restrictions.
We have this cultural divide. There is animosity. There is this tension and frustration that comes when one side tries to force their value system, their beliefs, their policy on the other. So let's find some solutions, and we can do that by matching people up with the government they want.
In the last few years, groups of people in Illinois, Colorado, and Southern California have explored separating from their states, which McCaw thinks could be a solid solution for a lot of folks.
This is a tool that we could use anywhere to get people government that makes sense for them.
But talking about secession is a lot easier than actually doing it. To make where I'm standing here in Oregon part of Idaho, which is just across the river, both state legislatures would have to approve it. And even if both sides of the Snake River agreed, it would still have to go to Congress for its green light.
And the national conversation right now is just sort of talking about the divide and not the way to come together.
Journalist Leah Sotilli covers the Pacific Northwest, watching plenty of national media parachute in to cover this secession initiative over the last year.
In the reporting that I've done, that shows that it really is in line with past secession movements that have happened in Oregon and the Northwest, which have been informed by racial politics, by identity politics of the day.
Some secession advocates acknowledge they may be railing at windmills here, but the publicity's part of the point, to try to get the attention of people like Oregon Governor Tina Kotek on a listening tour across the state.
We are thrilled to have you all here today.
In an interview with the local CBS station earlier this year, she made clear she wants to address frustrations and move forward as one state.
I want to reset this relationship with rural Oregonians so they feel heard, that they are part of the decision making, and making sure that their communities can be successful.
Back in eastern Oregon at a county meeting.
But your website acts like we voted to join Idaho. You're not being honest.
Far from universal support to split off.
Our country is divided enough as it is.
If you did that in the United States and tried to move borders all over, I mean, what a chaotic thing you have there.
Yet another shifting fault line in our divided states.
If all the population gets all the vote and has all the power, what does that say for the rest of us? Why even go vote?
It sounds like some of what this is that you feel powerless.
We are.
We are totally powerless.
Our thanks to the many people who talked to us for that story. We've got more coming up, too, in our next installment of Divided States of America. You're going to meet some of the realtors helping to settle people they describe as political refugees into their new communities.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.